that's the thing that that burns deeply in my soul. Is like I really, really, really want to just do right by you because you've trusted me with your story.
Welcome to the Red, Green, Blue Podcast.
All right, welcome to the podcast, and we're going to be talking with Tim Irwin, who is a documentary film director and has also filmed as an operator and a cinematographer in a number of great documentaries as well as for HBO Sports and other fun things like CrossFit and Arnold's bodybuilding. I'm actually really excited about that one in particular. So we're going to talk about that, his career and what he's done and so on. It'll be great. So thanks for coming, Tim.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Great. So how did you get into film?
I mean, from the very, very beginning, I remember my grandpa giving me like a little 110 Instamatic when I was in third grade. And that was like my first introduction to making images. And in fact, I remember like at one point, I went to a private school and it seemed like most of the kids had a lot more money than I had access to. And we had a photo project in the art class once, and everybody shows up with these like fancy SLRs, and I just had my little 110. And I remember having to like, I had this kind of like thought like, oh my gosh, like I can't compete on the gear that I have. I'm going to have to really like compete on the framing. And so I remember it making me feel like thinking outside the box a little bit in terms of what I was actually shooting. And I kind of feel like that sort of established a direction for me.
Great. So why do you do documentary, and what is your philosophies on documentary?
I mean, documentary has always been what I wanted to do from the beginning. In high school, my high school was a communications magnet. And that means we had a radio station, and there were photo and video classes.
What state was it in?
California.
Yeah,
I was in San Jose. And it was a lot of stuff was available to you. You didn't have to take those classes. It wasn't like it was only that, but those classes were available to us.
Well, I'd be very competitive in being in that, California and all.
Yeah, I mean, we were in Northern California in San Jose.
So it wasn't like everything.
No, it's not like a Hollywood place or anything, but I really gravitated to that stuff. And all I was doing in my video classes was filming my friends skateboarding or making documentaries about my friends' punk rock bands. And I just developed a love for it and never wanted to stop doing that. So,
oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So, in fact, one documentary you got here is We Jam Econo. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a documentary that I made at a time in my career. Well, the first part of my career, it was a weird time in the 2000s. I don't know if you remember, like the dot-com bubble, like right at the turn of the century.
Oh, well, you being in San Jose, you had been in the center of that.
Well, I was here at that time. I was in Utah. Yeah. But it was a weird time because there was money kind of everywhere. And we were doing some cool projects in the BMX world.
Also, that was peak DVD money. I really think that was like for like skater videos and stuff. There was like a market for those, and it's a genre that almost has disappeared because it's just taken over by YouTube clips.
100%. Yeah.
It used to be like you'd go to the skate shop and buy a DVD of like your favorite skater, and it'd be like come to music and be like the music rights would be like 75% of the budget, and you'd pop in your DVD with your friends and jam out. I mean, it was a wonderful time in retrospect.
100%. Like
people would spend $20 on that, and the DVD cost 50 cents to make, and the skate shop would take $8 and you get 10.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the genesis of what I wanted to do. It's like, in high school, like I was watching skate videos like Wheels of Fire and Streets on Fire from Santa Cruz, and like Public Domain, I remember, came out when I was in high school, which was like the Powell video. And those were the things that inspired me to do, that wanted to keep, like, when I saw that, camera work suddenly became like, oh, maybe I could do that for a living and not just for fun,
Yeah.
But that's actually also how I found out about the Minutemen, was through skateboard videos.
Okay.
It was a Santa Cruz video, and my friend Keith and I, we found out about the band the same day. It was really weird because this was probably in '89, and the band had not been a band since '85. And but we both showed up in our video class at high school. And I was like, man, check out this band, the Minutemen, that I just discovered yesterday in this skate video. And he had discovered them completely different. He wasn't a skater. He'd read about them in Spin magazine, like his brother's old Spin magazines he was checking out. And we fell in love with the band, and we kind of couldn't believe that no one had ever done a documentary about them. And we lost... we were disconnected after high school. We kind of lost touch. But then a few years later, maybe several years later, we reconnected, and he was kind of shocked to see that I was doing film stuff. And he had been working all through college. He did college radio, so he kind of had some connections in the music world. And he was like, "Dude, you should do a documentary about the Minutemen." And I was like, I kind of poo-pooed it. I was like, "Nah, I'm not. I'm not the guy. I wasn't there during the scene. like." But that sort of planted the seed. And then, like I was talking about earlier, where there was money everywhere in the early 2000s, like I had been working for a company doing these BMX videos. And when the .com bubble popped and that kind of money disappeared and that company I was working for imploded, and I kind of needed to make a decision. Like, am I really going to try to do this film thing, when times are kind of hard and there isn't just this money everywhere to do stuff? And so I called my buddy, Keith, who had planted that seed. And I was like, "Hey, man, I think it's time that we try to do this film." And he's like, "Well, what do you mean? Like, what? I'm not working in film. Like, I don't even know how to do this." And I was like, you be the producer, and let's just make this thing together. It'll just be you and me." And he was like, "All right." And so I don't know. It was kind of the stuff of dreams. Like, we weren't sure we could even do the film. We didn't know. Mike Watt was kind of the face of the band at that point, because the band was a trio and D. Boone was dead. Like, he died in 1985. That's how the band ended. And so we kind of needed permission to do this film, And I remember we like checked out, because Watt was still touring, still to this day. He tours like in the same punk rock way, like in an Econo van, and he drives the country.
Jeez, he must be like 60 or 70.
Yeah, he's in his 60s now. But we checked out his tour schedule, and he was going to be coming through Salt Lake at Liquid Joe's, actually. And so the day that he was supposed to play, like, I just pulled up in the parking lot of Liquid Joe's at like 4 p.m. because I knew he'd be doing sound check at some point. And sure enough, I saw the van pull up, and he went in and did sound check and kind of waited till he was done. And then I just approached him and introduced myself and told him what we wanted to do. And he was real protective of the story. I think people had approached him over the years, and I just told him to finish the tour. And then after his tour was over, we'd come talk to him. And if he wanted to do it, we'd do it. And if he didn't, we wouldn't. And so, fast forward a couple months at the end of the tour, we went down there, and he was like, "All right, like, I'm ready to tell the story. Let's do it."
Great. Well, that's exciting. Yeah. So how long did it take you to shoot? How long did it take you to edit it?
Man, I'd have to go back and look at my journals, but I'd say it was probably about a year of shooting and then maybe 6 months of editing.
Wow. Yeah. A year of shooting. Yeah. Was it like off and on again? It wasn't solid? Yeah, no, not solid at all, because we were, it was just me and Keith, and we were paying for this out of our pockets. And I don't know. It's a weird thing. Like, when you grow up in a high school, my high school is big and in California, right? Like 3,500 students in my high school. And Keith and I were like the only people that knew who the Minutemen were. Like, maybe there was 2 or 3 or 4 other people, but that was it. Yeah.
And so we kind of felt like nobody knows who this band is. It was totally a labor of love for us, and never any expectation that like this was going to be any kind of success, But it turned out pretty good for us. Like, the premiere of the film we did in San Pedro, California, which is where the band was from. And the theater that we booked was the Warner Grand, which is like an old Victorian theater. It seats 1,500 people, and it's like 2 levels.
Yeah.
And the first time I saw the theater, when I walked in, I just, like, my heart sank, because I was like, oh my gosh, like,
I'll never feel this.
Yeah, like 300 people are going to show up to this.
It's like an old school big theater. Yeah,
totally. But we sold it out.
Really? Wow.
And
for a documentary, that's astonishing.
It blew my mind. And like, we had to turn people away. And And then somehow, like through the network of like independent theaters, like that kind of like people found out about that. And so indie theaters all over the country and all over the world started calling us. They're like, hey, we want to book your film. And so for a year, we toured the film around the world in the US and we made back the hard costs just on the theatrical, so that when we did the DVD deal with Plexifilm, like we actually made a little bit of money, which was kind of mind-blowing to me.
No, that is amazing. I mean, the first time you like make money from a project that you actually like doing is really just, you're like, wow, this is like free money.
It was mind-blowing. And the other part of it too was it was a real career starter, I think, in a lot of ways, even though I was 5 years into my career at that point, but everyone in the skateboard world saw that film. And so instantaneously, like I had some connections there. And people at Fuel TV, which was a channel owned by Fox Sports that was all action sports. Yeah. Guys over there saw it. And so there was kind of this instant credibility that we had from that, which was amazing.
No, that's great. So is that, you got, so what, how did you get into shooting, like doing cinematography and being a camera operator on documentaries?
Yeah. I mean, nonfiction was always a thing for me. Like it was never, I didn't look at that as like a stepping stone to get to Hollywood or something. Like I'm not interested in making like fiction Hollywood movies. It's always been nonfiction. And in college, I went to BYU, and at the time in the film department, there was no nonfiction filmmaking stuff. There was one class of doc history, and that was it.
Yeah, no, it's amazing how much that department has improved. Yeah,
totally. It's totally changed now. But so when I went there, I was like, what? There's no nonfiction stuff? And so I decided to not major in film. I minored in film, and I majored in sociology because I wanted to do nonfiction stuff, and just kind of built my own curriculum. I would talk my sociology professors into letting me make a documentary anytime they wanted me to do a research paper.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, nonfiction was always a thing for me. But as far as career-wise, like the way it got started for me was there's a local filmmaker, Steve Olpin, who was a documentary guy, and he had shown a few of his films at BYU when I was a student there, and I kind of fell in love with his style, and I was like, man, those are the kind of films that I want to make. And I ended up taking a class from him, and he, after college, after kind of struggling for a little while, he called me up out of the blue, and he was like, hey, I'm editing this documentary that I did about two BMX pro riders. And he's like, I just need someone to come into the edit room and so that I can bounce ideas off them. Like he wasn't hiring me to edit. He was just hiring me to like hang out with him in the edit room, basically. And so I did that for about a week. And then he's like, hey, I got to go shoot for a week. I'm going to make a copy of the project. And why don't you just stay here and edit while I'm gone? And so when he left, like I worked my ass off. Like I lived in the edit room for that whole week. Like I would edit till 3 a.m. and then wake up at 8:00 and then edit again and then just sleep in the edit room.
Editing is so time consuming.
Yeah. But at the end of that week, he came back and he was like blown away, and he was like, oh man, he's like, you're the editor now. He's like, I'm not the editor anymore. Like you're the editor. And that started a relationship. He and I working together for about 10 years. And
wow.
So yeah.
No, that's great. So what is it like shooting action sports?
Yeah, I mean, that's,
so did you shot for Fuse TV?
Fuel.
Sorry. Fuel.
Yeah, we did a lot of work. I mean, Steve and I were always freelance, so we never like were in-house with any of those places. But yeah, I used to do a lot of work for Oakley, and then we did a lot of TV work for Fuel.
Who founded Red Camera. Right?
That's right, Jim Gennard, yeah. In fact, I remember the day, like I was on a surf shoot in Bali for Oakley on the day that Jim sold Oakley so that he could start Red Cameras.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's funny. It's such a funny connection that a sunglass guy revolutionized cinematography. Like, big time.
My buddy James, who was like he was the head of video at Oakley for decades. Yeah, and it was him and Jim that kind of dreamed up, like, you know, they were filming all this action sports stuff, and at the time we were using either 16mm film or when the HVX 200 came out, the Panasonic camera.
I remember that camera.
Yeah, that was like the first time.
That was like the doc camera. It was mini DV.
No. It was his P2 cards.
Oh, P2 cards.
You're thinking of the DVX 100 was mini DV.
DVX 100. Oh, never mind.
Yeah, but the HVX was the first time we felt like, oh man, we don't need to use film because we can get real good slow-mo out of this camera. It's the first time you could shoot discrete frame slow-mo in a video camera that wasn't a Varicam that costed $60,000, you know? And anyway, so James and Jim Gennard, that's kind of where they started dreaming up their camera ideas from that. They were like, I remember him telling me initially, like some of the ideas were like, they wanted to have a camera with a mirrored shutter, spinning shutter, like a video camera with a mirrored spinning shutter, so you could have an optical viewfinder. And but anyway, those discussions were what Red Camera was born out.
That is interesting. To me, is that time all the parts were there, and as the established companies, and this is why Red was such a disruptive entity. I think that just all the established players were just having a good time with the way things were. Everybody liked renting the film cameras, and they had great film cameras they had worked forever on. And Jim just said no. And it's amazing. I was actually one of the first 100 Red camera owners in the world. And because when I saw it, in fact, the first time I heard about it, it was like at a party my sister was throwing, and a friend of hers was like, "Have you heard of this Red camera? People say it's going to replace film and cinematography, but I don't think it will." I was like, "Oh, it's gonna." Because I'd shot some projects on film, and it was just so insanely expensive. It's like it costs like $1,000 for 10 minutes of footage, you know, with 35 millimeter film, between processing and the cost of the film. Sometimes $2,000 depending on the stock and stuff. And I was just like, this is insanely, expensive, and stills had all gone digital. And so I just thought, well, this is inevitable. So I got on the waiting list immediately, and I didn't know, nobody else saw that had that vision. And that's actually how my rental company started, because people just called me up and wanted to rent it because I was the only one.
Red one. The
red one is 30 pounds. But again, it was amazing. You look back at that camera, it's so unwieldy, so hard to use. The menus are ridiculous. Maintenance was ridiculous. Like, I became an electrical engineer doing it. But in fact, they shipped it with a bad sensor and then replaced the sensor like 6 months later. I was like, oh my goodness, why don't you just ship it 6 months later? Like, I had to send it in to get it, but it was a free upgrade. But anyway, it was a really interesting time. And when it came out, 99% of movies were shot with film. And then within a year or two, 90% of movies were shot digitally. It was like that big of a shift. And it was just astonishing. And bless Red Camera for doing that. They've been bought by Nikon and, are hopefully going on to other, great things. But all the other digital cameras, cinema cameras, they really owe it all to that Red one. And Jim, a sunglass guy.
Well, it was really an action sports. I think it was born out of action sports stuff.
You do, because filming commercials for for Oakley.
Yeah.
Ray-Ban bought Oakley, FYI. But anyway, or did I get that wrong?
Well, there's even a higher up parent company, that owns like every. It's an Italian company called Luxottica. They own almost every eyewear brand in the world.
Ray-Ban is probably the one people may know. But anyway, they shooting action sports, and shooting high-speed film would be insanely expensive.
Yeah, totally. It was. They wanted to design a camera that they could use to make the kind of stuff they were shooting at Oakley, and the Oakley stuff was rad. Like, I never knew what I was getting into. Like, because it could be skateboarding one day, or it could be snowboarding, or it could be baseball, or PGA Tour golf, or desert racing. Like, they were a rad client to shoot for sure. Yeah, well, and also they changed. They're in the history of photography, the history of cinematography, which is a prestigious place. In a way, I'm sure he made more money off the sunglasses, but in a way, like, as far as impact on society, I really feel that Red Camera had a bigger one, because it made cinema. You can even look at films made in Europe. In the BBC in particular, they just said no more film, like early in the HD days. And so that's why a lot of BBC content, like 1995 to 2005, 2007, is really flat looking, because they just were using super low quality cameras because they just didn't have the budget at all. And then digital cinema came out, and all of European cinematography improved drastically. Yeah. Of course. Well, that's, when you can instantly cut off that much of the bottom line of the budget, by not shooting film, it becomes pretty difficult to make those arguments.
Yeah, especially for independent film. Jeremy Kuhn, he said that 50% of the budget for Napoleon Dynamite was film and processing. 50%. They only had a few $100,000, but you can imagine what you could do with 50% more budget all of a sudden. And even I heard the guy, what's the name of that movie with Matthew McConaughey won Best Actor for? about AIDS and drugs, drugstore cowboy. I don't know. Anyway, but I saw the producer of that. He had done a number of independent films that were really big and famous. And he said this price, because of digital cinema, that the price of shooting a movie has actually gone down over the past 20 years. You know, because it's just the technology's improved so much. His price was like almost 30% less than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Yeah. Anyway, so we'll move on. But so an action sports, so was it cut to music, kind of action cuts kind of stuff?
Well, yeah, but for us, for me and Steve in particular, and I think one of the reasons I was drawn to him is like, we weren't interested in just making a skate video. Like we wanted to do documentaries. Like we were interested in the people and telling the stories behind these athletes, you know? And so, I was never interested in being like the skate shooter guy or the BMX shooter guy. Like I was interested in being the documentary guy. Mm-hmm. And so that was what we specialized in. And so while Steve and I were together, that's the kind of films we did. We did documentaries about Dave Mirra and Ryan Nyquist and Corey Nastasio and TJ Lavin and dudes like that. And we were really just trying to kind of like show who these people were, where they came from, and what their life is like now.
Oh, really? Well, that's great. So on some of these operator ones, I love a lot of these documentaries you've worked on. Have you, I mean, can you tell us about Raiders a bit? For Raiders, the greatest fan film ever made, I'll just give some exposition, is a movie about these guys who would shoot a shot for shot remake Raiders of the Lost Ark since they were like kids. But they got older because as they did it, and they were back to finish the one last scene, which is that iconic, really difficult scene with that weird Nazi propeller airplane and fighting the really big buff guy who goes into the propeller. And it was really elaborate, right? Well, probably one of the most elaborate action sequences of that era. And so they finally raised the money with the Kickstarter and they're going to shoot it. And you can tell us what it was like.
Yeah, so Jeremy Kuhn and Tim Skousen, this is their film. And
Jeremy Kuhn was a producer of Napoleon Dynamite.
Exactly.
And now he does a lot of great documentaries.
That's right. Yeah, both of those guys were actually students of mine. Like I used to teach one class a year at BYU, Super 8 filmmaking.
Okay.
And so that's how I met both of those guys. But they just called up and they were like, they told me about the documentary, which you just described. And they said the part we need to film now is them actually in production, like making this. And so these guys... So you got to understand that like these guys started doing this in the 80s, like right after Raiders came out, like when they were like 10, 11, 12 years old. Yeah. And now they're in their 40s and they're coming back together to finish this last scene of the film. And but this time they did it pretty elaborately, and I think I can't remember how much they raised on their Kickstarter, but it was not insignificant. They had some budget.
It was tens of thousands.
Yeah. I want to say it was at least 40. Yeah. Might have been more than that, But yeah, so they had a week of shooting in Mississippi, and this is right in the middle of the summer of Mississippi heat and kind of out in the swampy area.
Yeah, rain delayed it forever, which I'm really amazed they didn't think of it. I mean, it's a desert. They should have shot it like in a desert like Nevada, Utah, Arizona.
They were living there. Well, at least the director was living there at the time, and so I think that was
plane tickets can be bought. Rain is a real problem. But anyway.
I think the other part of it was like they wanted the authenticity of like, well, this is where we did it.
Because they shot all the other ones. Yeah, and that's location continuity.
Exactly.
Missouri for Saudi Arabia or for the Middle East. Yes. Anyway.
But I mean, it was super ambitious what these guys were doing. And so, yeah, Tim and Jeremy brought me in along with another shooter. And then Jeremy was also, and Tim were both shooting. So there was 4 of us kind of roaming around the set. But it was a week-long shoot, and it was super intense, and culminated with them blowing up the full-scale model they had built of this plane, like not full scale, full size, plane that they had built. And I don't want to ruin the film, but there's some pretty surprising things that happen.
No, I loved it. In fact, actually, I talked to Tim. I saw it in a special screening. I talked to Tim after, and it's like the amazing thing I found about that scene they shot. You had all the drama you'd have in a shoot of a feature-length independent film. People quitting, people whatever. The list goes on. Anybody who's ever worked on independent film would know what I'm talking about. But it was all in one scene. It was... there was a crazy amount of drama for that one scene.
Yeah, I think it's a really beautiful film. I think.
It is. No, it's about relationships and creativity and taking a risk. And I mean, I really have every bit of admiration for those guys and for what they did. But again, I mean, it really makes it an interesting film. I mean, at the end of the day, like if it had just been a smooth shoot, and that would happen. But no.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing that I love so much about documentary and why I just want to keep doing this stuff is I never know what I'm getting into. You know what I mean? Like, who would have thought? If you would have told me in high school, like, yeah, you'll be filming these guys in Mississippi that are remaking a scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark, I don't know. It's wild. But it's a film worth checking out. No, it is. In fact, another thing, I mean, one thing you can't help but think when you're watching is like, why don't you just make another movie? Because like it's so much work to copy of Hollywood film frame for frame. You could have made a whole nother movie. But I guess it was fun. I mean, homage and fan fiction and, you get to be Harrison Ford, right? And so on. Maybe that was probably what was motivating them. But it was, it's really amazing. And even when they were kids, like it's amazing how much detail and effort they're able to achieve in getting close to the look of Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. I realize now Raiders of the Lost Ark takes place mostly in Northern Africa, isn't it? Like Egypt? Egypt, Northern Africa, kind of like that area. Anyway, I don't want anybody to get me in trouble. Say, why did you say Saudi? Call you say Saudi Arabia. So there we go. Anyway, so another one I really enjoyed that you worked on was Insufferable Gru. And just a little exposition on that. That movie is wonderful. It has Jack Black in it. And it's really interesting. Again, it's a kind of honoring a guy who just won't quit and makes independent films. And he just does extremely low budget films, quick and dirty. I think his tagline is like for himself. He's like, I'm Gru. I've made 57 movies or like 100 movies, something like that. I think it's over 200.
Over 200, exactly. And he just basically gets people from the local colleges. He even charges the actors to be in the movie. And then just like, if it's a Green Goblin, he just slops paint and a cheap wig and they go for it. It's just like, it's great in a lot of, it's really admirable to him, but it's kind of crazy too. But anyway, well, it is. But and that's what makes him such an interesting character. But what was it like working on that? Yeah, that was kind of a delight to work on. In some ways it was super hard to work on too. But Gru, I think there's a lot that can be said to criticize the things that he does, the films that he makes. But you really cannot deny his passion and his kind of go-get-em attitude and like his willingness to just go for it. And I think that was kind of the basis for why Scott, the director, wanted to do the film. And as far as shooting it, we usually had 2 camera guys on set, sometimes just one. But mostly what we were doing was just documenting Gru in the process of making the film he was making at that moment, which was, I think it was called The Unexpected Race. And it was about a kind of a love story between an elf and a human, and the FBI are chasing the elf. Yeah, and Jack Black stars in it at the end. That's kind of that's like the climax of the film. And to me, it's amazing that worked out. It's a big risk to be like, what if Jack Black says no? You still have a film, but it wouldn't have that tie-in and that great ending scenes. Yeah, that was kind of the crux of the whole thing. Like Jared Hess, the director of Napoleon Dynamite. Yeah, director of Napoleon Dynamite and director of Nacho Libre. I shot the behind the scenes for Nacho Libre, and Jared, when he was wrapping the film, like what he gave out as wrap gifts was Stephen Gru box sets. So he gave Jack Black a box set of Stephen Gru films. And so, there's this little smattering of like Hollywood people that are aware of Stephen Gru and his films and kind of little pockets of fandom. But Jack was aware of Gru. And so Jared was also a producer on the Gru documentary. And so that was kind of the crux of the film, was like, it wasn't like the strings were pulled so that we knew Jack was going to be in the film, but there were some connections there, and we're like, all right, well, let's make a film about seeing if Gru can get Jack to be in his latest film. And in the end, what happened to that film? To the Gru, the film that you were documenting being made.
Oh, the Unexpected Race?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he finished it. And
did he like make put on YouTube, DVD, or?
I don't know where it lives right now. I remember he had a screening of it, and I don't know if it lives on YouTube or not. I'd have to look it up.
No, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I should Google Gru videos on YouTube, and because I'm sure some of them have made them.
Oh, there's hours and hours and hours and hours of Gru material on.
Are there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's something.
He posts most of his films up there.
Is he still working?
I follow him on Instagram. I haven't seen him in person in quite a while. I know Scott and Eric Robertson, one of the producers of the documentary, they are both in touch with him. And I don't know if he's still making films, but I've noticed lately on his Instagram he's releasing music.
Interesting. So he's gone to the indie music scene. I'm curious to see what he does with AI. That's going to be.
I think maybe, I don't know. You'll have to listen to the music and see what you think, but I think it's.
You think it's AI music?
I think so. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, no, Gru, this is the thing about, you know this, but when you work on a documentary, whoever the subject is, you spend so much time with them, they practically become a friend and like part of your life, and you keep up with them. And like, there's a guy I did a documentary on, and I see him at the film festival, Sundance Film Festival, because he goes there every year, and I run into him and we have a little chat and catch up. And, it's he's really part of my life. The documentary was like 10 years ago at this point,
Yeah. For me as a documentary filmmaker, that's like one of my biggest philosophies is like, I desperately want to do right by the subject.
Yeah.
Like I'm not here to try to I don't, approach it like, this is the story. Like I don't have this rigid story of like, this is what we're doing. This is what it is. Like in my mind, the thing that's rigid is like, I desperately want to do right by you, the person that is trusting me to film you. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't always come across as, when I'm a shooter, but when I'm a director for sure. And if I'm conducting interviews for sure on camera, like that's the thing that that burns deeply in my soul is like, I really, really, really want to, just do right by you because you've trusted me with your story.
Yeah. No, and to me, also, I guess, for me, I know it's kind of in document, I guess, how do I say this? Post Michael Moore, there was a trend in documentary to kind of just really, sell out your subject. And I just can't do that. I'm kind of more of the old school, the pre-60s, 70s era, 30s, lifting up the common man kind of thing. And, not, making people in your documentary look stupid for laughs.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It's one of the shows that I work on pretty regularly right now is a show called Artful. And it's a half-hour show where we profile 2 artists per show. And the shoots are pretty lean. It's usually a 3-person crew. It's a shooter director and a shooter and a producer. And we wear all the hats between the 3 of us, but it's a really kind of intimate amount of time that we get to spend with these artists. We usually spend 2 days if we don't have to travel to get to the artist, or 3 days if we have to travel to get to them. And in those 3 days, we're talking about art, we're talking about faith, we're talking about the deepest, darkest moments of their life and how their art or their faith led them through that, or how their art or their faith is affected by that. Whatever their faith may be, kind of all walks of life, but art is the thing that binds them together. And in these 3 moments, as a filmmaker, you really, really bond with these people very quickly because of the kinds of things that they're bearing to you. They're bearing their soul. And it is, there's we're on season 6 now, and I have all these artists, so I feel like I have a real deep connection to, and it feels like an honor and a privilege to be able to do that. Oh yeah, for sure. And now I want to caveat that Gru, I don't feel like they sell out Gru. It's comical, but it's it isn't selling out and just kind of getting it for what it is. Yeah. And, I think it's fair to ask that question, though, especially in a film like that, because there's clearly stuff, that people are critical of Gru of, the way that he does
honestly,
some
you
of his
protected
things.
him. I'm kind of aware of some of his independent film antics, which would, anyway, they would not play well.
Yeah, but I think that I feel like I can legitimately say that the filmmakers, Eric and Chris in particular, they deeply care about Gru, and they wanted that to be a platform for more people knowing about him, and hopefully a platform to help him have some success. So, but as documentaries go as well, there's realities of some of the things we captured, and we were creating a story arc and a character, and so sometimes some less than perfect attributes work their way into those stories as well. And I think those are the things that make us human, and those are the things that we want to be able to respond to in a film.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I had a dilemma like that with the documentary I did as well. And I mean, I'll just talk about it because I don't want you to put, whatever. A lot of people are involved in GRU and stuff. But my subject got fired during the course of filming my documentary. My subject got fired 4 times for sexual harassment. And I was like, this is a really big, and it was nothing like really bad, but it was bad, And he liked to ask inappropriate questions to girls at work, essentially. And I didn't know how to process it. I didn't really know what to do because it wasn't like what I set to do a documentary about, but it was a big thing. And in the end, I just decided I just had to drop it, But that's something to keep in mind when you're watching a documentary, if it had been like he'd gone to jail or if it was further, but it was a part of his life.
Wait, how long were you working on this before you were like, I'm just going to not do it?
Well, it didn't happen during film. It happened during editing, really. I did some follow-up. And I do think it influenced my documentary structurally in that I had done some insert interviews and kind of some follow-ups on his life. And then I just said, no, we're just going to stick to this 10-day period that I initially filmed. That was like 90% documentary. Because if I did do like backstory in life, I would have to go into this, and that's just another documentary about a guy who has sexually harasses girls at work at low-level jobs, like pizza delivery guy kind of thing. And honestly, I think that's part of the reason why I'm, So anyway, there you go.
You never know what you're getting into.
You never know.
Yeah, there was one film that I shot early on, it's called Awful Normal. And it was about, Tim Skousen actually directed this one. And he brought me on to help shoot just a couple of the scenes that they were doing. But the basis of the film was the woman who was directing the documentary, who had the idea, who came to Tim. She was in her 30s, I think, at the time. And she had been sexually abused when she was a kid, and she wanted to do a film where she knocked on the door of the guy that abused her.
Oh, jeez.
Really heavy.
Jeez.
So yeah, I was there filming.
In the film? How'd it go down?
It's pretty wild. Like there were sort of two moments that I was involved in. The first one was she reached out to the guy's now ex-wife and daughter, and it was a family friend. You know what I mean? So it was mixed up in all kinds of weird feelings, but she just said, hey, I want to come have dinner with you guys sometime and catch up or whatever. And so we go to dinner and we're filming them having dinner, and it's just kind of like, normal, like small talk. And then the guy's daughter, just looks at Celeste, the director, and goes, well, can we just stop beating around the bush? And can you tell me the shit that my dad did to you? And and it kind of took her back for a second, but then she was like, okay. And she spelled it out like in every detail. And I can remember, it's the only time that I remember, like, as a shooter, like the words that were being said, like, had such a profound physical effect on me. Like I was totally incapable of thinking about, like, I was like, what is the exposure doing? Or what is I couldn't operate the camera. Like, luckily it was locked in, like I was handheld, but everything was fine. So I didn't have to make any of those kinds of decisions in those moments. But I remember just being so like shaken physically by the words that this woman was speaking as she described what her abuser did to her. So it was really, really gnarly.
No, that's a weird thing, again, about documentary work in general, is you see a lot of weird stuff. I mean, you're an observer and just stuff, and it really can traumatize you. And honestly, like, I think, like, I have friends who like photographed, during the Iraqi wars and Afghanistan wars and stuff. And I really just never have wanted to do that.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, you can't unsee what you see. And, and there you go. Yeah. And it really affects your whole life. In fact, even a Vietnam War photographer, I can't remember, what's his name? Don McClellan, something like that. Anyway, he's huge. He's got like a full book. He's the Vietnam War photographer. And I've seen in interviews later in life, he says, I just really regret ever photographing war because I have all these images in my head that were just terrible.
Wow.
And I just can't get rid of them. And it's like basically ruined my life, even though it's 30 years in the past.
Super heavy. I can't relate to that. I haven't experienced that kind of stuff for sure, but I don't
know. That's up there. It's a different kind of terrible, but it's still about as terrible as it gets.
Yeah. I mean, that film was, I think it did have a profound effect on me, but I think it was positive. Like, I think for one, it was years and years and years before Me Too,
Yeah.
But I think it just opened my eyes a lot. Like, I was shocked at how many people, when I told them I was working on that film, how many people were like, oh yeah, I was abused, right? I experienced similar to that. And so I think it opened my eyes to like how idyllic my own childhood was and maybe how prevalent that problem really was. So
yeah. Anyway, well, moving on to happier subject.
What do you got there?
So what about Arnold? I'm curious.
Okay,
I'm doing like this. You do a lot of like this strongman competition and stuff. Like, what is that like?
Yeah, that stuff I love shooting that stuff. And so Todd Sansom, who I don't know if you know or not, but Sansom Media, it's a Salt Lake production company. And he did tons of work for Rogue Fitness. Like, that was like one of his main clients for a long time. And he still does stuff for them. But for a lot of years, he would bring me along on shoots that he would do for Rogue. And so a lot of, we would film the CrossFit Games every year, and we would do a lot of like commercial work for Rogue. But one of the things was the Arnold Strongman Classic.
Yeah.
So the Arnold Sports, I think it's called the Arnold Sports Festival, is in Columbus, Ohio every year. And it's actually, I was really surprised to learn this when we started filming it. It's the largest sporting event in the world. Like 240,000 people show up in Columbus for that.
For the Arnold Strongman?
Yeah. And
really?
80,000 of them are athletes that are competing in some event or another.
Amazing.
It's like every sport that doesn't have a home somewhere else, that's where their home is the Arnold Sports Complex. So it's like,
well,
yeah, it's all kinds of stuff. Like, you never, like,
I'm guessing not Frisbee golf.
No,
it probably has.
It would not shock me. It would not shock me. Like, I mean, there's literally like LARPing and like
really?
like Moz wrestling and leg wrestling and every flavor of bodybuilding. And anyway, but the stuff we were involved in was the strongman competitions, and the Arnold in particular is known as the heaviest. Like, those guys do insane things out there. So yeah, I had the privilege of shooting that for almost 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
So what are some of your observations of super strong fit guys?
I mean, those dudes are gnarly. Like, the strongman world is like, there's no rules. So most of those guys are doing some kind of pharmaceutical stuff. It's more about the, what can the human body do given no limits?
Yeah.
And the stuff that these guys do is nothing short of incredible. I mean, yeah, I've watched guys deadlift over 1,000 pounds several times, and like the feats of strength that these guys are capable of are insane. And they're all giants too. Like, I mean, Hafthor is literally like, I don't know how tall he is, but he's approaching 7 feet and got to be 400 pounds. And his hand, like, you shake his hand and you feel like you're a baby. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
He's just massive humans. So I don't know. And the other, like, we've gone to most of these guys, will go to their homes. We used to do a series called Road to the Arnold, where we'd go profile, 2 or 3 different athletes leading up to the event. And so we'd hang out with these guys for a couple of days and just see how they live. And the thing that was most shocking, I think, was the eating. Like, most of these guys are pounding like 10,000 calories a day. And they just constantly have rice and beef and carrots like in a Tupperware, and they're just always eating. And most of them say that's the hardest part. Like, it's not enjoyable at all. It's like they really have to force feed the calories in to just be able to keep their bodies where it needs to be weight wise and protein wise.
Oh my goodness. Well, yeah, no, full-time job in a way. I mean, between working out and recovering and
the cooler part of that stuff that I think that we've done, like, the events are fun, like, and exciting, but we did a series of films for Rogue, like feature-length documentaries about stone lifting, about the culture and history of stone lifting, because it's a super universal thing that almost every country has a history of. And so we did 3 of them. We did one in the Basque region of Spain. We did one in Scotland, and we did one in Iceland. And it was about going to these countries and kind of in a very respectful way, like showing the culture of the country and showing how centuries of lifting stones has shaped parts of that country. So I always felt really honored when I got the call to help shoot those.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, in fact, I just realized, so this North Korean doc, I think I know this well. Can you talk about it, or do you want?
I mean, we can talk about it.
It's like a friend of mine my freshman year of college. It's what it's about.
You know him?
Yeah. Well.
David Sneddon.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, no, I know him pretty well.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah, no, it's funny. Like when it first happened, it was like, what? Like the guy in my apartment all the time?
That's crazy, yeah.
Yeah, Dave Sneddon, yeah, so I know him well.
Yeah, that's a wild one. That one's not finished yet, but it's another Scott Christopherson film. I think, at least right now, they have it formatted as kind of an episodic story. But the story is that David Sneddon was a BYU student who was studying abroad in China. He'd gone on his mission to Korea, so he spoke Korean fluently, and he was doing Chinese language study abroad in China. And during a break of his studies while in China, he was kind of traveling around and doing hikes, and some with friends, and other moments he was on his own. And one of those moments, well, we think he was on his own, or he might have been with someone, just disappeared. And there was a report that came out of Japan. I'm trying to think when this would have been in, probably 2016. So I think David disappeared in 2011. Am I getting that right? Or was it 2004?
Yeah, around then, yeah.
Okay, anyway.
Well, no, it's earlier. No, it was
yeah, it was like mid-2000s, right?
Yeah, it was like 2004.
Anyway.
Yeah, 2005, something like that.
It's been a while since I was working on this film, so I don't have my dates right. So forgive me. But anyway, many years ago, he disappeared. And then I think around 2016, there's a government agency in Japan that deals with abductions by North Korea of Japanese citizens. But they put out a report saying that David Sneddon was alive and that he was married and in North Korea.
Yeah. Because apparently like North Korea abducts people if it's like a high level skill they need or something. I mean, that's like at least like the rumor again.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the theories that some people were putting forward. And there really aren't any concrete answers right now. But yeah, filming that documentary has been pretty incredible. Like we've spent a lot of time with the family and in particular with one of David's sisters who was really close to him. And it's a heartbreaking story. And I just hope more than anything that family can get some closure sometime soon on whatever is a result.
In a way, it kind of represents like all disappearing people. You know, I just can't even imagine like someone so close to you disappears.
Yeah.
You know, there you go. I like to believe he's living in Korea and being married. That's nice. And I've family members, they firmly believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do some don't? The ones I've heard from have.
Yeah. I mean, most of the film,
maybe it's optimistic thinking, but
most of the film, I mean, it's a big family.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly how many brothers and sisters he has, but I want to say there's 10 kids in that family.
Yeah, no, they're everywhere. And some of his brothers married some of my friends.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I mean, Michael, the oldest brother, has kind of like, over the years, he's sort of taken the lead on the family's positions and what they should be doing about it. And so a lot of the film is about Michael and his efforts to find his brother. But a lot of the film, too, is just exploring kind of family dynamics and when a family goes through a tragedy like that, what do those relationships look like? So I think, like, I'm kind of the same, like, as I've gone through the film, like, there's been times where I'm like, there's no way he's still alive. And then there's been other times where I was like, he's 100% there. He's 100% in North Korea and married. And so, as we interview different people and kind of learn about different theories and different evidence and whatnot, it's, everybody kind of forms an opinion what they think. Personally, I hope that he's still alive. I don't think I feel like there's no hope. And in my heart, I'm like, man, I really just hope he's still there. And I really hope that his parents are getting really old now, and so
Be nice to
for
see.
me, it's like, man, can we please just get some closure for these guys before they're not here? You know?
Geez. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, it was really nice talking to you. These have been some great stories, as all documentary person who works in film and documentary has, but you're particularly nice. And thanks for listening to the viewers. Anyway, do like and subscribe if you want to hear more great interviews with filmmakers.